Welcome to Reflections in Veterinary Education, better known as Thrive. Um, for this show, it was my turn to pick a topic, and something that I really wanted to talk about was evaluation of teaching. And that's a really broad term that we're going to get into. Like, what does that actually mean? But um, there's a fair bit of stuff that like I kind of want to talk about, and so like, basically, how are we evaluating teachers? How are we evaluating learning? How are we evaluating, all of the things that go into it? So it's messy. And there's, I think, a lot of things that we do poorly when it comes to evaluation of teaching. And some of that is because I think it's just hard. But some of it is because I think, we're just not always doing that great. And I think that hurts teachers. I think it hurts students. And I think it hurts like development and improvement in teaching. And so we're going to focus on higher education because that's where we all are. But I think a lot of the things kind of apply, in a variety of settings. So that's the topic. That's something that I care a lot about, and so that's where we are. So your first thought. So Eric, when I said I want to talk about evaluation of teaching,
Yeah.
what comes to your mind?
We had an episode where we talked about student evaluations, where we like read bad
Oh
evaluations as
yeah,
like
that's right.
cathartic experience.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about that, and we'll surely get into that more. I took a class during my master's degree about peer evaluation of
Mhm.
teaching. It was focused on K through 12 educators, but the principles are the same, you
Yeah.
know. And I do think it is interesting to contrast the evidence that there is about evaluation of teaching with people's lived experience of that.
Mhm.
Because there is, some interesting evidence out there, and I think that as educators, we maybe don't always focus on the best evidence.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, we're so going to dig into that a lot more. It's a good intro, get people excited. Catherine, what comes to your mind when we talk about evaluation of teaching?
Well, I kind of chuckled to myself, to be honest with you, especially in higher education. And I was actually talking to my husband as we were driving back from Target this evening. He's like, "Oh, you have your podcast, you have a guest tonight." I was like, "No, Bobby has a topic." And he's like, "Oh, what topic did she choose?" I was like, "Well, she wants to do like peer evaluation of teaching." And he's like, "Isn't it kind of hard to do peer evaluation of teaching when most people haven't been trained in teaching?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's partly what we're probably going to talk about." So, um, yeah, I feel like peer evaluation of teaching is one of those things that everybody thinks is a great idea, but then when they start doing it, realize that, yeah, it is a great idea, but we have no idea what we're doing. And then there's a sort of handful of people who are like, but we're going to try to do it anyway. And about half of those people do it really poorly and don't care and end up quitting. And then the other half are like, no, this is really hard, but we want to do the right thing. So, yeah, I think those were my initial thoughts. They were all
Yeah.
over the place.
Yeah. So yeah, and I want to get into peer evaluation of teaching, but I wanted to also keep it broad, like all
Sure.
kinds of evaluation of teaching. And so we've already mentioned some, like student evaluations of teaching, peer evaluation of teaching, but like I want to dig into all of the things, right? Because there's an evaluation of teaching, and then I also think it's important to tie that in with the evaluation of learning, right? Like
Yeah.
we assess our learners, we give them exams, we give them assessments, and I think that's really important. And I think here we all understand that teaching is part of that. It's not the entirety of that, but I think the whole goal, right, is that if we are effective educators, that will in turn lead to more learning, and like the correspondence of those two things, that's the piece that I really think is often missing when it comes to evaluation of teaching, regardless of who's doing the evaluation. And not that that alone should be the indicator of quality teaching, that sort of thing, like how are the students performing, because there's danger with that for all sorts of reasons. But I do think that that's a piece of the puzzle that rarely gets talked about.
Sure.
and I can remember, and I tried to find it today and I couldn't find it, but I read a study years ago that was like eye-opening for me. Like not surprising, but like just a cool study. And I think it was in the Netherlands, and it was a higher education study where they took it was two courses. I want to say it was like pre-engineering courses or something. It was undergraduate courses, and it was the same course taught by two different instructors, and you know, same objectives, that sort of thing, but like different approaches to the teaching, that sort of thing. And they compared the student evaluations with not the student's performance in that course, but in the follow-up course, right?
Yep.
So the two different courses, you all know what I'm talking about, right?
Yep.
So two different courses, or two different sections of the same course that then was a prerequisite for a next course, that all the students took the same next course essentially. And then they looked at performance in the follow-up course, and what they found in that particular study, which is one instance, but that the student evaluation of teaching, the students rated the professor lower, but those students perform better in the follow-up course. Like,
Yeah.
so the argument is, right, like they learned more, but they didn't necessarily like the course as much. And so for me, I'm just like, yeah, that totally tracks, right? Not that that's going to be true in every case. Like, I'm not, I understand that, but I do think there are instances where a course is challenging, and maybe you don't get the best grade, and maybe you put a lot of work into it, but you learn a lot. And so, you know, that's obviously one of the reasons we don't want to rely solely on student evaluations of teaching. But I also think that piece of, but how are they actually performing later? That was so fascinating for me. And like, you know, I think vet school is one of those opportunities where we have like a curriculum where all the students follow it, and this builds on this and builds on this. And I think that there's a lot of missed opportunities to really assess the long-term effects of learning, and you know, where is that going? Now what we often don't have are like the same sections of the same course to make those comparisons. But I think for me it is really important to consider the learning aspect, and not just, you know, did my peer think it was good, did the students think it was good, but like, was it actually good? So that's one of the things that I want to try to dig into is, you know, how do we incorporate that more into our teaching evaluations too? So wondering if
Yeah.
either of you have thoughts on that.
I do. I think one of the things that jumps, and I think I've read either that paper or something similar to that
Yeah.
paper. You know, one of the things that jumps out at me is that student evaluations of teaching are easy, I think, because you just have students do it. You don't have to put quite so much effort into it. But what ends up happening oftentimes is that students conflate liking someone with high quality teaching, right? So you can dislike someone and still learn a heck of a lot, and you can like someone a heck of a lot and not learn anything at all. And I think students oftentimes aren't mature enough or self-reflective enough to understand that. And so that's one of the pitfalls we fall into when we only rely on student evaluations of teaching. And that's not to say that there aren't some value to those. There isn't some value to those, and we've had that conversation. I think that to your point, Bobby, so I'm actually participating in an external peer review of teaching in a dossier form right now for somebody who's gone up for promotion at a school in the western side of the United States. So they go through the Regional Teaching Academy. And one of the things that I really appreciate about the way they've very thoughtfully put together this external peer review is that they have sort of these levels, you know, that you can assess on this rubric, and they give you good examples of what that level should demonstrate, right, to be assigned to that. But they're actionable measures. They're things that you can quantitatively, and I'm a qualitative person, but there are things that you can quantitatively say and you can require to have in the dossier, right? So it's like, you know, maybe a novice person talks about doing something, a more advanced person implements that thing, but then to be like at the top level, the most proficient at it, not only have you done those other two things, but you're demonstrating that you students have learned. So have they demonstrated that they've talked about it, they've implemented it, and they can support that by saying 50% of my students increase their scores by 6% overall, right? And I think that, like you said, is one of the things that we're often missing when we talk about peer or any evaluation of teaching, is like that quantitative way to measure what exactly the outcome is for your students. Because in the end, your students may love you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think the thing that comes to mind for me is and again, all sorts of problems with outcome assessment, but like NAVLE scores,
Mhm.
where Auburn cardio students had historically done below the national average for years and years. And then I took over the course. Then once they took the NAVLE, they scored 4% above the NAVLE.
Yeah.
And did for the 2 years that I was in charge of that class. Now that's correlation, not causation, right? Like
Right.
I don't know that I can claim like, oh, I did that.
I would
But
if I were you.
it's yeah, I mean it's neat to see, it's like, oh hey, yeah, there is this outcome measure that we care about, which is NAVLE, scores
Yeah.
and passing and that sort of thing. And then we can, backtrack that potentially to, the courses that they took.
Mhm.
Um, and just really quickly with the students liking the course thing, I do think it might be worth comparing lecture or classroom time versus lab time.
Mhm.
Because I know, at least for myself with surgery lab, like the students are like, they're like, they're high strung. And like, if you can't bring that energy down, they're not going to hear, I
Yeah.
think, anything that you're
Yeah.
saying. So,
Yeah.
whereas in the classroom, I'm like, no, I'm going to stress you out. Like in
Right.
lab, I'm like, no, you need to calm down.
Bring it down. Yeah. No, I think that there's actually quite a bit of literature on student evaluations and the biases that they have, right? Like I mean, you
Oh yeah.
guys know, even simple things like what's the topic? What's the
Yeah.
subject? Right? Like if I'm teaching histology, no offense to the histologists out there, but like that's hard to make that like when I'm doing drug calculation stuff, it's really hard to make that sexy.
Yeah.
Right? It's really important, but I'm like, if that's all I do and I don't get good ratings, like is that really me? And now at the end they can calculate the CRIs and I'm really excited, but they're like, yeah, but she sucks because she made us do all
Yeah.
this math.
Right.
So part of it is even just the topic that you're teaching. We know that women and people of color get rated even when it's blinded, right? Like
Yeah.
when like you here's the same information, that here's the syllabus, compare the syllabus and who's
Mhm.
more caring and like all these different things. We have all these biases from students. So we know that those are problematic. Doesn't mean we should get rid of them completely, because I think, as you said, like, there are certain things that really only the students can speak to. So we need some of that information, but yeah, super duper flawed in a lot of ways, and that likability, right? Like, do you
Yeah.
like somebody? Well, guess what? If you give me a higher grade, I like you better, and so we know there's also been plenty of correlations between that. The less hard the course is, the less work I have to do, the higher it's rated, and then the higher my grade or my expected grade, then the higher that course is rated. So there's certainly a lot of things that are maybe make that flawed, certainly as an only thing, which is unfortunately really common, right? That when we do evaluations of teaching, it's only the student evaluations in a lot of situations. And so, yeah, Catherine, you mentioned the peer evaluation of teaching, which is also problematic, but it is a way to try to at least get another, if
Yeah.
I would prefer at least having some peer evaluation of teaching in addition to student evaluation of teaching only, because it brings a different perspective. And then to your point, as far as, but how do you know that you can even do this peer evaluation of teaching? Like, absolutely, it's challenging. And it's hard. It's a lot of work to
Yeah.
do good evaluations of teaching, for sure.
Well,
But
and
I
it's
also think it can be really valuable when we do it.
yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of other things underlying that though, right? It's the time that it takes. Like it's easy to tell somebody to go do an evaluation
Oh
of
yeah.
teaching. It's much harder to tell them how to do it well, to create a good rubric, to give them the training they need, to have them find the time to go do it, right? Like when I was in my first academic job, my last 3 years there, I was the director of quality instruction, right? And 20% of my time was spent on doing one-on-one,
Yeah.
basically mentoring with individual faculty members, 5 to 6 of them at a time. And it took a lot of time because I had to set up a time to talk with them for a half an hour, kind of figure out what they were teaching, why they were teaching the way they were teaching, if I could get to it, what their philosophy and approach was, have conversations about what do you feel like you could work on, what is it that you would really like me to help you with, and then go through the observation process, get the feedback from the students, aggregate that information, deliver that to them, provide, like all this feedback. And I did that twice a semester for each person that I was doing that. So it was quite a bit of time. And not everybody has the time or commitment to creating that type of environment. You know, in the end, I worked with over 40 professors, from lecturers all the way up to professors who've been working for 30, 40 years, and they all got something out of it, you know, different varying levels of things
Yep.
that they got out of it, but they all got something out of it. So was it valuable? Yeah. But was
Absolutely.
it really time consuming and potentially expensive? Yeah, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's also the challenge, especially in academia and in a clinical setting when people are stretched already so thin. And
Mhm.
as we know, it's this 80-20 rule, like 20% of the people do 80% of the work anyway. And then you're going to ask them to do these evaluations and they're going to do it, but they're just going to be that much more stressed about whatever
Yeah.
else it is they're doing. So
Yeah.
all of the things that are involved with that.
I like what you
You
said
know,
though, like everybody got something out of it. One of the things that I've sort of experienced with peer evaluation of teaching, I'm not sure it's necessarily all that helpful as an evaluation method, but I think it's really helpful as a coaching method, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's the value. So like, when I've done it, like, I'll write up a summary letter of this and that, and it's not really meant to be like an evaluation. It's
Right.
meant like, here's what you're doing, here's all the things you're doing well. I mean, it is a little bit of an evaluation, but it's meant to be formative, and like, here's what and it's meant to demonstrate you're putting effort into your teaching. So like
Yeah.
when you go for a promotion packet, not are you a good teacher or a bad teacher, but are you putting effort into your teaching,
Yes.
and have you shown growth, which I think is valuable, right? Because I feel pretty comfortable that just, anyone who puts effort into their teaching will probably get better at teaching, right?
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because when I was doing it, I wasn't evaluating them. And I
Right.
made it very clear in those meetings, listen, this is not an evaluation. This is not information that's going to be shared with anybody that would, like if you want me to, based on this
Yeah.
information, I'm happy to write, my summary report, but
Yeah.
this is not something I'm reporting back to your boss, to your dean, your department chair. This is strictly for you and to be,
Yeah.
so I called it an observation, like a
Yeah.
teaching observation versus evaluation. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good point to make that distinction.
Yeah.
the thing that this puts me in mind of actually is triangulation of data. I think we tend to think about that with qualitative
Mhm.
methods, but I think just research methodology in general, right?
Mhm.
Like you want to find reality.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? You can get this quantitative data, you can get this qualitative data, like you have to put it all together to form a gestalt impression of the thing. And so it's basically, okay, so we're going to do a research study, like Catherine, you were saying, for each of these faculty members,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
collect all this data and analyze it and put it together. Like, yeah, like that needs to be part of someone's FTE, like when you
Yeah,
think
and
about
it
it.
was. Yeah.
Um, that we're trying to triangulate and figure out reality from this disparate data that is never going to be reality,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a
in,
constructivist,
in
no.
my opinion. Yeah, I'm a post positivist where I'm like,
Oh, okay.
who knows what's real?
Yeah.
We're stuck in the matrix.
So
So
I just have to say before we leave this topic and go on to something else, I may have told this story before, but when I was appointed to that position, we had a new dean that had known me and made that position for me. But he basically told me that I had to figure out what the name of my position and like the title was going to be.
Mhm.
And so I really wanted to be the director of instructional quality, because then I would be the DIQ, also known as the Dick. And I did not think that he would be okay with that. So I decided to be the director of quality instruction instead. But I would have much preferred to go around and tell people I was the Dick, just FYI. So there you go. My little funny
Oh my
story.
God, so many jokes are coming up
I
right now.
know, right?
I'm like, is this appropriate for the podcast? I love it. That's pretty good. No, I haven't heard that anecdote before. No, I think you're right, Eric, though, like with that triangulation, that's kind of, what I'm thinking about when it comes to good evaluation of teaching. It should be a little bit of all of these things,
Yeah.
right? Like I want to hear what the students are saying, because if honestly the students are like, this course is terrible and I hate it and the instructor's mean, but that's important. And I think we need to know that, because we know that that will also influence their ability to engage in the course, right? Like if they hate everything about it.
Just
But that,
real quickly, I think I've told you before, I got a lot of student evaluations of intimidating for
Mhm.
years and years. I'm like, okay, so like I need to take that and
yeah,
reflect on that and think about like my proxemics and like how I'm interacting with the
yeah,
students and do something with that, because
yeah.
you're right. You can't read these student evaluations that are this is bad and ignore that data.
Yeah, yeah. But again, if that's the only thing, you're just like, well, I'm sorry that I'm tall and kind of imposing, and some
Right.
people are going to just be right. Like some people, there's nothing you can do about that. They're going to feel intimidated. But I think it's really important to reflect and say, okay, well, are there things I can do to mitigate this, right? How do I address this? Because you do want to be able to connect with your students. We know that that's important for ultimately for learning as well, but it's not the only thing. And so, okay, so we're going to look at student evaluations and we're going to understand that. Yeah, they really like this person. That's great, but they're not actually learning anything. So we need to know that too. So having a peer assessment, a peer evaluation, or a peer observation as part of that, I think is really great. And what's the evidence that the students are actually learning the material? And then what are some other pieces that you think are important? I have some ideas, but I want to hear from you all. Like, what else should we be doing to assess the quality of someone's teaching?
That's a really good question. I think it might, and Eric and Bobby obviously jump in at any time, but I think that might speak to what it is we're trying to do with ABE, right? And come up with this idea of how do you certify that somebody is an expert educator? Because we talk about this in education a lot, right? Like we want to deliver quality education. We want people to be reflective learners, lifelong, but like, what does that actually mean? What does it actually mean to be a quality teacher? What does it actually mean to be effective? How can you define that in a way that's measurable and that's like repeatable and that other people could do that and then potentially have the same or similar outcome? And I think the challenge is when you're doing social science research is that every individual is the same. Eric and I and Bobby, we could all go in, teach exactly the same thing, read off a script, do exactly the same stuff in exactly the same class with exactly the same number of students, exactly the same time of day, all the things the same. And the students would still give us completely different evaluations because they're all individual people and we're all individual people. So I think, I would like to see a little bit more request from the instructor to do self-reflection as part of that evaluation, right? Like honest assessment of like, I really feel like I screwed this up, or man, I'm really good at X, but I could really work on Y, or I am an intimidating instructor and I'm trying to figure out how to not be intimidating, or I don't like, so one of this evaluation that I'm doing, one of the things the teacher mentioned or the instructor mentioned was that students had repeatedly talked about difficulty hearing this individual at the end of a sentence because they would do sort of that, they would their voice would drop a little bit and it would kind of fall off and do the upswing into the question. And so this individual actually went and got some voice coaching and saw significant change in the responses of the students saying, oh, we can understand everything they're saying now. We can hear everything. It's very clear to us. So, I mean, things like that, that a teacher's willing to read, reflect on, and then do something about, we're never going to know unless we ask them, right?
Yep.
Because I do think I hope, and maybe I'm just being overly optimistic, but I hope that most people who go into academics actually want to help people learn, right? And if part of helping people learn is knowing how to teach, then maybe they'll be willing to sit down and be really honest about what they're good and what they're not at. So
Yeah,
long-winded way of saying self-assessment.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, and one that maybe sort of gets included in like a dossier if you have to write like your teaching, your philosophy or something, which isn't even included in everybody's dossier, right? So depending on if you have like a teaching portfolio and that's included, if you're not submitting a teaching portfolio, that may not be included. But rather than just saving it up for the dossier, like why can't this be an annual or biannual thing?
Yeah.
And here you're just going to write up a paragraph and then here's what I plan to do. And then here's evidence of what I've done after reflecting. So I love the idea of getting, your self-evaluation. I think that's really important. Again, as a piece of this puzzle.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Other ideas?
So what comes to mind for me actually is in my public health degree, we talked about program planning. So you start with your needs assessment, like, okay, what figure out what the information is that you need. And then you also have like your process assessment, like, are you executing the plan as intended?
Yeah.
As well as your outcome assessment, like short-term and long-term outcome assessments, like do people, not smoke cigarettes, and then people not die of lung cancer 50 years later, like, so that's kind of where my brain goes to with something that Catherine is saying is like, I don't know how much time we spend looking at the process step of that, of like, are we executing this as intended slash designed? And you were mentioning, the student evaluations. I always think of there's a professor that in my last institution is very popular, does a great song and a dance. Students love them. Get great student evaluations. Doing a peer observation, I would watch and be like, yeah, this seems like reasonable, andragogical approach. But it's all straight lecture, right? Like there's very little interaction, there's no active learning, and like these kinds of things that, we have evidence that suggests that that helps learning. So that that would be missed, right? With all these other data points, and maybe even the students learn well, but like, is their process evidence-based and what we want?
Yeah,
and is it evolving, right? Is it growing and changing according to what students need? Because every class is a little bit different, every generation is a little bit different. Like, are you evolving? We've all had that professor that's literally delivered the same PowerPoint for 30 years, literally the exact same PowerPoint for 30 years. The pictures are the same, the words are the same.
It's just photographs of the original slides.
Yeah, exactly.
Slide deck, yeah.
We've all had them, right?
Yeah. No, that's what I was gonna talk about, Eric, is there are, techniques, there are, we active learning strategies, right? So if you're going up there and you're lecturing, you're reading off your slides for, 50 minutes, like, I think we have pretty good evidence that is not the ideal method to enhance learning. And I'm not saying you can never use lectures. There are times when we need, but like, so is there a way for us to evaluate, are you using these techniques? If we say, this is what we want you to do, how are you incorporating this? So we could create a rubric or a check, I don't know, whatever, that says like, okay, you're using this technique, this technique, this technique. This is how you're using active learning. This is how you're engaging the students. This is how, right? And we can evaluate those things more objectively. Now, there's still, that alone doesn't give you the pieces. Is it effective? Is it working? But at least you're doing those things versus you're just lecturing. And so I think, to me, that would be a relatively simple way to assess, at least, are we moving toward the things that evidence says is going to be more effective learning techniques or teaching techniques and learning strategies. So so I think that there's some fairly low-hanging fruit that we could be doing to assess, because if you go through a course and it's lecture, 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 and there's never a think, pair, share, and there's never a, a quiz, there's never a poll, those are easy things that we can address, and that we can score people on if if we need a score of some kind, and then build on that to say, okay, what difference is it making? And I think that would be obviously even better. But again, that's another piece of the puzzle that I don't think we're doing, right? Like, if we think that having quality education is important in our programs, then I think observing that and saying, this is part of the job now. Like, you can't just go and lecture 99% of the time, or like, we could create some standards to say, this is what we think is fair, to at least move us towards some of those things.
Yeah, I think, to Eric's point about the process of teaching, I think it's also the process of the assessments that they implement and use, right? So we always want to look at outcomes. We want to know whether students are learning what they're learning, but the fact of the matter is if every student's getting a 90% or 95% on every exam, there's something fundamentally wrong with the exam, right? Whether it's too easy or it's not written well and they're constantly having to give things back, or whatever the case may be, right? So like, I think about, from a very personal level, going back to my radiology days, right? The bane of my existence. Which is unfortunate because I actually really like radiology. But this whole idea of like that like paragraph question about this giant blown up radiograph that you saw on a screen in a dark room and had literally 15 seconds to look at and evaluate. And then you've got this paragraph that you have to read. And then there's literally A through J options. And then the question is like, blah, 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 blah. Is it A, B, and C, C, D, and E, A, and C, D, and E only?
You're not testing,
like,
you're not testing radiology.
That,
you're
right?
testing reading comprehension and logic.
Right. And so so the thing is like, are the exams that they're using appropriate? Are they doing are they testing what they want the students to really demonstrate? Like, are they and again, it's one piece of the pie,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But it could be a phenomenal teacher, but
Hmm.
the
But the
students
assessment sucks.
are doing crap because the assessments suck. Like
Yeah.
I think that's a really important thing. And that speaks to that
That's a
idea of
great point.
process, right? What
Yeah.
process are you using to assess your students? And is it a
Yeah.
quality
Love it.
process?
Yeah. That's great. Um, Here's the other, I'm going to throw a wrench in all of this. So who cares if quality teaching isn't rewarded?
Well, I mean, I think individual instructors care, right?
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
in the
Right.
end, I mean, yeah, it's a very good question. And it's probably one of the main reasons that we don't do
Yeah.
robust evaluation of
Because I
teaching.
care a lot about my teaching, but that's not what's going to get me promoted, right? Like I need to write grants and I need to, develop new techniques in the clinic. And this is what I'm speaking rhetorically
Right.
here.
Yeah.
This is not actually like
Yeah.
my career has been largely, based on my teaching, but that's not the message that a lot of universities and colleges are sending. It's that no, we want you like, yes, you're working at an academic institution and our main goal is to teach the next generation of blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
and we're hiring people and like, oh no, but the thing to get you promoted is doing good research, or working in the clinic, and if you show up to class and you read somebody else's lecture, that'll be fine, that'll be good enough, and that for most people is. And even if you really care a lot about your teaching, but you're getting pulled in all these different directions, it becomes really challenging to find the time, because everything we've just talked about takes so much time. It's a
So
lot of effort.
it's a little bit, in my mind, a failure of capitalism, right? Because
Mhm.
ideally, the consumers, which are the
Mhm.
students,
Mhm.
should look at their options and be like, oh, I'm going to get a better quality education at this place.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to go there. But we know that that is what, so first of all, that information is not available to them,
Nope.
right? So they can't even begin to make that decision. And two, that's not what they base their decision on.
Right.
So, like, as long as the consumer doesn't really care, I think I think we need to ignore external motivation or extrinsic motivation. Like I think that we need to acknowledge, like, on our self-determination theory, spectrum of totally internal motivated and totally external motivated, uh all that external motivation stuff, not like, just toss it out the window, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just disregarded. Let's focus on, like, do you want do you identify as an educator? Do you want to be a good educator? Like, do you want to get better at this skill? Do you want to have, the connectivity with your students and your peers that follows from? Do you have the autonomy to make those decisions and, try out different things? Like, that's where my head goes, is always self-determination theory when we're talking about motivating people, is like, okay, so yes, you're not going to get external motivation. How do we make sure that you
Yeah.
realize that this is an internally motivated activity?
I
Yeah.
love the optimism behind that.
Well, here's the thing that's really interesting. I will say, first of all, I will say that the tides are turning a little bit, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Slowly, they're slowly turning. It's the Titanic, slowly
Yeah.
turning. But
Let's
they
hope
are
it's not the
they,
Titanic.
well, yeah, let's hope. Although right now that might be a really good analogy. But they are turning, so I think that's encouraging. Now it's taken multiple decades for that to happen.
Yeah.
But I will also say, when I was going through my PhD program, my dissertation wasn't necessarily about motivation, but it certainly was looking into sort of what first year science professors in an undergraduate program, like, so if they taught like biology 101, chemistry 101, physics 101, those types of courses, like what they knew about the discipline of education, right? And what I discovered was that all of them really wanted to teach well. Like every single one of them wanted to. Now there were only 10, but they were from institutions across the United States, some large, some small, some private, some public. And they all really wanted to teach well. But what they had was a significant dissonance between what you guys have just talked about, right? Like, I really want to teach well. Oh shit, that takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of time. And I only have so many hours in a day and so many days in a week to also write my grants, get enough money to do this. And oh, by the way, promotion tends to be more about how much money I bring in versus how much I teach. And I actually had multiple participants say to me, I know that I can get promoted if I bring in a grant and teach poorly, but I know I'm not going to get promoted and do the things that I want to be able to do, which includes teaching better if I teach well but don't get the grants. And so they had to prioritize that because of the systemic issues that they faced. So I think that there is some level of motivation, but I think it's not as extrinsic maybe as some people think it is in a lot of cases. I think to teach well, I think it's more that like they literally can't survive in the career they've selected unless they prioritize what is going to get them promoted. Because then once they and I had multiple people say this to me too, once I get promoted, I know that I can spend more time getting better at teaching because I have protection, right? Or
Yeah.
that was the perception at least that they had.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it's a really frustrating thing in academia. I think it's also one of those things where potentially as instructors and as teachers, as educators, we have to be really thoughtful about where we decide to work, right?
Yeah.
So, like, and that makes it hard when you're sort of coned down to veterinary education because there's only so many places that you can go. But honestly, one of the things that drew me to the job that I'm now in is that the institution doesn't have tenure. It's a very teaching focused institution. So, if you're going to get a long-term contract, which is their substitute for tenure, you better teach well,
Yep.
right? So you have to be kind of careful about, as you know, we talk about students not self-reflecting. A lot of that's maturity, I think, too. But as you grow and mature in your career and in yourself, if you can reflect on what kind of institution you want to be in, and if you want to go to an institution that values research, go. But if you want to go someplace that values teaching, find a place that maybe does that and gives you that opportunity.
Yeah. I agree. I'd love to be optimistic that like the intrinsic motivation alone is sufficient, but I think there needs to be a mixture
Yeah.
of intrinsic and extrinsic external motivators. Because like just like you said, Catherine, you're like, yeah, I really want to do this, but like, is it worth sabotaging my career to put this time and effort into it? And I think you're also spot on when it comes to where are you, you know? And I've been very fortunate in my career that I've been at places that people before me like paved the way and said, hey, we need to prioritize this, and I was able to kind of catch that, and was able to get promoted primarily on my teaching at two different institutions, right? So this wasn't just like a fluke thing, and I know we're starting to see more and more of it. As you said, you're reviewing, you're serving as an external reviewer, Catherine, for somebody's teaching dossier out west. Like we're seeing more and more of that, which I think is wonderful, and so I think that is starting to change for sure, and I think we need to keep pushing. I think that we're not quite where we need to be, right? And not only like you said, there's still, even if you're like, oh yeah, you can get promoted in this. I'm not aware of any vet school where you can get tenure based on your education, right? Tenure is still
There is.
Where?
University of Calgary. I have a friend who got tenure based on teaching. Yeah.
They got tenure based on, now, was it based on just the quality of their teaching, or were they bringing in grants?
Nope, it was the quality of they did do research, but it was scholarship of teaching and learning research.
Okay, so it wasn't big grant, it wasn't,
nope.
Awesome. Nope. That's great.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, I think that is maybe more common than you're aware, because I've been at 2, maybe 3 institutions where you could get promotion and tenure on the basis of your SOTL work. Assuming it was, somewhat published, but it wasn't a massive,
but it was tenure.
Yeah.
That's great.
And I think, I don't know, I just quick rant, like for veterinary clinicians, tenure is meaningless.
Oh yeah, I couldn't care less about
like
tenure.
they can't fire us because they can't replace us.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean,
when I first started though, and like, we weren't quite in the situation we were, and I felt like things were a little more competitive. I just never worried about tenure because I'm like, my job security is if I do a good job, right? Like,
show
do
up,
a good job.
Show up, do your job. Like it is not hard. And
well, I mean, to be honest with you, like the tenure system is broken anyway, right? 100%. Like if you look at the history, regardless of some of the people that I've talked to at your institution, Bobby, who erringly tried to correct me, even though my dissertation actually just had to investigate the origins of tenure, which was the early 1900s, not 1960s. The origins of tenure were protect and in equal measure the academics' ability to do research, to teach, and to provide service in equal measure with a little bit of immunity against this idea that they had to teach what somebody else wanted them to
Exactly
teach,
right.
right? And so tenure was never meant to be weaponized. It was never meant to be something that protected people from being fired for cause or for
Right.
egregious behavior. It was intended to protect people who were expressing ideas that maybe weren't the norm or that were controversial, that but allowed them to have that freedom of speech and space to do the work they wanted to do so that they could grow, truly grow the body of knowledge and help their students grow, right? And so it's been bastardized pretty significantly over the 100+ years that it since it was implemented. And again, it's a systemic issue, right? And a capitalist issue in many ways, to go back to Eric's point, because obviously tenure much that a big part of that shift happened when the states started withdrawing their support from schools, like the financial support, and then it was suddenly, oh crap, what do we do? Oh, we'll just lean on people to bring grants. So it'll be interesting to see what happens now that all of the NIH grants are gone, right? So that's a really good way to level the playing field. If
Right.
nobody can get a grant, well,
Yeah.
now what do? We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So so to redirect us to teaching evaluation assessment, I guess, what what do you want as an outcome, Bobby?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So, what I would like to see is multifactorial, right? But I would like to see meaningful evaluation and feedback for teachers, right? So, like truly meaningful.
What
And
I was going to say, so not to be pedantic, but like, what is meaningful?
Yep.
And I bring that up because I know you and I have a philosophical disagreement about peer observations.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like,
yeah.
what is meaningful?
So meaningful to me, what I mean by it is, I don't want it to be a checkbox like you're doing great, everything's wonderful. Like if you're doing a poor job at teaching, I think you need to be told that, right? Like if all you're doing is up there and lecturing, you should not get high marks for teaching. Sorry, I don't care how well your students like you. I think we have evidence to say that's not good quality teaching if that's all you're doing. So meaningful in the sense of we have like a pretty big body of evidence of like what are the kinds of things that that what is good teaching, what does it look like, what do we think it, again, flawed understandably, but I think giving some real feedback in that regard. I think so that's part of it. And giving people an opportunity to grow, providing support and coaching for the people who are like, hey, okay, I just got this feedback that maybe I'm not doing all the things I could be doing. How do I get better? Okay, let's provide some coaching for that. So I don't want to leave people hanging after being told like, hey, you're really not doing what you need to be doing. And then also, this is a little bit getting away, but be rewarded for doing that work and improving in some ways. So that's part of what I mean when I say meaningful feedback. So it's largely more about, I think, coaching and improving, a lot more formative than I want it. But it can't just be formative, like, oh, this is what you're doing. Like, I still think there needs to be like, you could do better. Because I just don't see that there's enough of that. I think there's a lot of like, hey, you showed up, good job. Just like you said, Eric, you show up, like you're good. Your job is secure. And I think we can do better than that. I'd like to have a little bit, I'd like to raise the bar for quality teaching, because nobody's ever raised that bar for me. I chose, right? Like that's my intrinsic motivation. Like I want to be better. And I've never had terrible student evaluations. I've had a few here and there, right? Like we've shared some of the individual bad ones, but overall, like, but then I look at the average, right? Like, so every time I get my student evaluations of teaching, they go, here's yours, and here's yours compared to the department average and the college average. And it's like, okay, yours is 4.7 out of 5, and the college average is 4.4 out of 5 or 4. And you're like,
Right.
So it's the same thing. If everybody's getting an A,
high.
This assessment, like to Catherine's point from earlier, it's not a very good assessment. And so everybody's getting an A. And then nobody's getting better and we're all just staying right here. And I don't think it's because we're all amazing at this. Like that's not what I think it is. And so I think that the current system for evaluation of teaching is keeping things stagnant. And not that I want it to be negative or bad, but I want it to be meaningful so people can improve, because we are not perfect at teaching. We're never going to be perfect, but if we're not trying to get better,
Speak for yourself.
What's that?
Speak for yourself.
well, we're not all at Catherine level perfection, and we all need to keep striving to get there. And until we do, right? But you know what I mean? It's if your clinical stuff, if you're just like, okay, I've learned everything I'm going to know. I'm never going to learn new drugs. I'm never going to learn new techniques. I'm just going to stay where I'm at. Like, one, that would be terribly boring. But like, we wouldn't advance knowledge. And I think we settle when it comes to teaching to say it's good enough.
But so actually that's a fascinating parallel, Bobby. So if you're a clinician and you do just come in and cruise, does anyone care?
I mean, I do.
Yeah, sure, but like, you know, like your boss doesn't know, like the clients don't know. You're just like, you show up doing the same thing. Like if you know, regional anesthesia has become a huge thing in anesthesia in the past 10 years. If I didn't learn all these blocks, like, would anyone care?
If you weren't killing patients or you weren't causing harm, probably.
No. If you weren't like doing the most like gold standard, like all the local blocks.
I think people would. I think maybe not immediately, but like if say all the other, now if your entire department decided collectively that we're not going to do it,
that we're stuck in the 2000s.
I think that would be harder. But I think if you're the only one in your department, and like, okay, who hasn't experienced this, where you have somebody who's probably 6 years past when they should have retired, and they come onto clinic 6 weeks a year, and every time they come on, everybody's like, Dr. Connor's coming on. Great. We're going to go back to the Stone Ages, and we're going to be doing this. And we're all just going to like pretend, like just do the things this way. Just like smile and nod when she comes to tell you something, and then do it this way. Right. Like we've all experienced that with different people.
Right.
So we do notice. Now, are there consequences? Maybe not. But I do think we notice, and I do think we care. And I think we try to slowly push those people aside. Maybe there's some peer pressure, right? Like if you just decided, Eric, that you're like, no, I'm not learning this, and everybody else in your department did.
Yep.
Don't you think you would?
So can we analog that to teaching?
I would love to. Yeah.
Yes, we can. But I will, before we forget, I am very curious about your fundamental differences, because I'm not sure I'm fully aware of the differences.
Observation versus evaluation.
Observation versus evaluation.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
That was less.
Eric's a big fan of observation.
Yeah.
And I'm like, for me, I'm like, it's in between. I'm observing, but I'm also evaluating. That's how I feel about it. Well, he's like, no, I'm just going to tell you what I saw and go from there.
Yeah, I'm just here as a data collector and just going to reflect the data back to you without any judgment, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm judging the heck out of you as well.
Yeah. Well, also, I will say one last thing that I forgot to mention. I think there's value in the peer evaluation of teaching from the side of like, I've done a lot of peer observations. I learn a lot, right? Like I personally
as the doer. Yeah.
100%. Like I find things that I steal from people that I'm going to borrow from people. And I'm also like, oh, I do that too. And that's not so good from this side. Right. So like, I think there's value in that as well, because it's not just a one-way thing. So
yeah, for sure.
So back to the
so that's kind of what I mean by meaningful. Like I really want there to be ideally more broad, right? Like, so not just student evaluations, not just peer evaluations, not just self-reflection, but like all of those things together. And to ideally have some benchmarks, right? So I can compare my own teaching and be like, am I doing the things I should be doing? Where am I on this? Am I average? Because like, I don't want to be average, but maybe that's okay for somebody who's like, I've got 3, $250,000 grants for blah, blah, like average is good enough for me in this. And I'm not doing that huge amount of teaching. But if you're below average, like there's not a lot of us who are like, okay, I'm okay with below average.
So submitted for consideration in thinking about the analogy with like clinical teaching and clinical practice and your peer group. At Midwestern, one of the things that really impressed me about the preclinical program is all of the teachers of that topic sat in on all of the lectures.
Love it.
So like, could you just imagine, like I'm sitting there teaching anesthesia and there are 5 anesthesiologists in the back row.
You are going to raise your game.
Right? That's some accountability right there.
Yes, I love that. And you wouldn't have to have all of them every time, but like one of them every time, like that would be enough. Right? Like as soon as somebody's coming in and watching, you are going to kind of up your game a little bit. So I love that from an accountability standpoint. I think that's great because that's not right. It's just the students and we're like, whatever, I'll get this summary at the end of the year. And like, oh, I only got 4.4 out of 5. And then, oh, big deal.
Well, and nobody knows, right? Like, I don't know what the other people got. Like there is not that peer, so again, self-determination theory, one of the things is social connectivity, right? So that's what motivates
Yeah.
us. And as clinicians, if we're like, oh, we're the standout that's not keeping up with the
Mhm.
others, that matters. Whereas if everyone
Yeah.
is still stuck in the
Yeah.
80s, whatever.
Mhm.
So, but we don't have that for teaching,
No, the
right?
peer pressure.
Yeah, I like that model, Eric, and I agree. It doesn't have to be like the whole team all at the same time, but somebody who's at least as expert or considered as expert as you are in your area. And I think back to my days when I was teaching regularly and teaching a lot in the MPH program, and my classroom door was always open to anybody who wanted to come in and observe, right? Like I had no qualms about somebody coming in, and I was like, listen, come in, you don't tell me, I don't really care. I'm
Yeah.
going to do what I'm going to do, right? Because I was comfortable enough in what I was going
Right.
to do. And if you come in and you have observations that you want to talk to me about, or if you have questions, guess how many people took me up on that in the 8 years that I worked there?
Yeah. Zero.
Big fat zero, right? Like,
Yeah.
why do we feel like we have to stay in this island? And I think it, so there's research in the K-12 literature that talks about the sort of personality traits of teachers. And interestingly, in K-12, it would be interesting to do this in higher ed too. But interestingly, in K-12, many people's personality profiles, they had characteristics of wanting control and power. And that's why they went into teaching, right?
Oh, 100%.
Because, yeah, so
Yeah.
they have the
You
ability
all
to,
have to listen to me.
yes, I'm the expert. I'm the one that you have to listen to. You have to follow my rules. You have to do the things I say. You can only have permission to go to the bathroom if I tell you you have permission to go to the bathroom.
I would
And
not
that
have
is
thought
like
that.
so counterintuitive to
Yeah.
what I want to do in the classroom. Like I don't want my students to
Oh
feel like,
man, that sounds amazing to me.
right? Like I want like because partly because I have imposter syndrome and I don't think I'm smart enough to be teaching them and I'm afraid I'm going to teach them something wrong. But also because I'm a constructivist. I do want them to be active. I want them to be engaged and I want them to be making these connections, building those new neural networks, asking the questions, challenging me at the same time I'm challenging them.
Yeah.
And people, so it would not surprise me if that same characteristic showed up in a lot of academics, because based on the conversations that I've had a lot with a lot of them and the hubris that comes along with this idea of like, well, I'm a specialist in X, Y, and Z, so of course I can teach it because education is easy, right? It wouldn't surprise me at all if there was a level of like, well, why would I want to go look at somebody else teach when I'm perfect at what I already do, right? Like, I don't need any help. I'm already good at what I do, even though they're not, or maybe they are and they still have room for improvement. So,
I think that's one of my favorite parts of peer evaluation or peer observation of teaching is how much you learn for yourself, right?
yeah.
Like, oh gosh, yeah, I have ideas for me too,
Yeah, absolutely.
which is really
So I think that that might be a really interesting study
yeah,
because
I love that idea, Eric, because it's you got the peer pressure
yeah,
built
yeah.
in, which I think is real, right? Like the accountability, but also just like, oh, it's really good to know what somebody else is teaching, and like that. That
Mhm.
just from a practical standpoint, I think that's brilliant. From that camaraderie, like we're all one team. Like there's so many good things about that. The hardest part is the time.
Yeah.
Right? How are you going to make the time for something like that? But if
Block scheduling.
if we prioritize, right, like if universities and
Yeah.
colleges said teaching is a priority, then guess what? There is time for this. Like we need to make time. But historically, that hasn't been a real, not a, I mean, like we say it's a priority, but not to the point we put resources at
Yeah.
it.
Well, the other thing that's great about that is that if you have a group of people in there, like you don't all have exactly the same knowledge, right? So you may be teaching something that maybe wasn't quite your strongest point in that particular area, and you can model like, hey, I see that I have my colleagues back here. This, I want to just double check with them that I'm telling you the right thing.
Ooh, that is
And then
so
students are
cool.
like, holy crap, he's a
Hey, we
specialist.
can
And
do
now he
that.
has to ask other specialists because he doesn't know it all. Like, how amazing would
We
that
do
be?
that stuff all the time in other circumstances. Like I was doing
Yeah.
resident rounds today, and we've got all of us in there. I was like, hey, well, what's been your experience with this? Because that's not super common. Let's talk about this. And so
Totally.
we do that all the time anyway. So yeah, why wouldn't we do it at this level? Because the
Yeah.
students can see that. How cool is that? Love it. All right, we solved it. Good
Yeah.
job. It only took us like less than an hour. Nailed it. Well done.
I feel
Uh,
like Eric had a last comment and I cut him off. So,
No. Yeah, just yeah. It's interesting thinking about how we model behavior on clinics, and that, like you're saying, Bobby, like in terms of like checking with each other and and challenging, and I check in with the residents and like, hey, like you've done this more than I have even. and how different that is from a classroom setting.
Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't need to be,
Maybe
right?
it shouldn't
Like,
be.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it should be, honestly.
No,
Right.
no.
I mean, it doesn't even necessarily have to be about the expertise, right? I'm thinking of like, even if you have a peer observer in there and you're like, so I feel like I didn't do a very good job of explaining X in front of the students, right? Like I
Right
feel
then,
like
in the moment.
do you guys have any ideas, or do you have any ideas for how maybe I could explain this a little bit
Oh,
better?
that's
Ask the
so, oh
class.
my God, I love
Ask the
that.
class. Like, is somebody like, I feel
That's
like
so
this
cool.
isn't landing. Does somebody else have a way? Like, how would you
Yeah.
explain
Yep.
this? Right?
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
let's talk through it.
God,
Yeah.
and you know what's crazy? Hearing you say that, like I do that all the time in other settings, like in martial arts class and in dance
Yeah.
class. Like I absolutely involve the learners and be like, how do I need to say this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So lots of opportunities.
Social constructivism. There you go. Plugging it again, Catherine.
I know. What can I say? It's the best.
No, that's really good stuff. No, so this was great. Yeah, thank you so much for this. I think there's again a lot of good stuff. I think we've got some really good ideas that we probably need to follow up on. We say that a lot.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to actually do it. But yeah, I think some really fun ideas as far as how do we elevate our ability to assess good quality teaching so that the teacher can get better and can know how to get. But that, to me, that's ultimately the goal, right? The whole point of an evaluate, the whole point of giving a student a test is so they can know where they are and say, what do I need to work on? How do I improve? And I think just the same kind of thing, but it's complicated. And I think we're gonna have to put some time and effort into it if we care about it and we wanna make it better. So thanks for the discussion. It was good
Cool,
talk
thanks.
as always. So yeah, I think that's probably a good place to stop, and we'll catch everybody next time.